Hey guys, welcome back for another episode of The Suited Shootist. And as you guessed from today's thumbnail, we are talking about lasers on pistols. Obligatory safety check. We are dealing with a empty revolver here, so all of that. And I want to make a special mention and thanks to Guy Schnitzler over at DFW Defensive Training. He is a buddy of mine, and he graciously loaned me these Crimson Trace laser grips because, quite frankly, while this is something that I was interested in, I wasn't in a position to foot the bill for a set of these just for academic purposes. So he kindly loaned me his, and I've been playing around with them for a minute. Now, why, in the era of red dots, would anybody put a laser on a gun? Because depending on where you're at in the online gun space, whenever you hear lasers mentioned, they are very rapidly dismissed or discouraged. And I have been, and to a degree, am still one of those people. And I'll kind of go into why. Over the last year, I've had the privilege of being an assistant instructor for my buddy Craig Summers over at Templar Defense with his hybrid LTC class. And it has given me the opportunity to interact with some folks who, quite literally, it's their first time handling a pistol ever. And even for those that have a bit more experience, they're still very early on in their progression. And I think at least once every single class, somebody will ask about lasers. And I mean, I can kind of understand why. Number one, they have been incredibly prominent in TV and film for decades. And I mean, let's face it, the term laser beam accurate has been part of the lexicon for forever. So there is this implication that having the laser facilitates the aiming process, and they're not entirely wrong. The issue is that while, just like with many things shooting, it's seemingly very simple and obvious on the surface, there are these murky depths of nuance and context that can complicate things and really make it a lot more challenging to give kind of a binary pass-fail type of answer. And again, the challenge that some of us may be aware of is whenever you're dealing with a laser, if you've been shooting for any period of time, you know that the gun is never perfectly still in your hands, regardless of how good your grip is. There's always going to be some level of movement in the muzzle. And when that's 18 inches in front of your face, it seems fairly nominal. Well, when that is then projected 3 yards, 5 yards, 7 yards, 10 yards down range, these little micro movements in the hand are getting amplified to this exponential degree. And it can be very distracting, it can be very discouraging, and it can be very challenging to try and process all of this information. So, as such, for most of the guns out there, I'm not necessarily a big fan. What I tell people is generally, if the pistol in question has sights that are easily replaced and or it can readily accommodate a red dot, I would go with either of these two options first, at the very least. And given my druthers, because this is what I have done, if the pistols are large enough, like with my Glock 19 and my SIG P365, dots on those guns. Because from my exploration, my experimentation, that seems to be the best option. Now, what do you do for smaller guns? Because that's really the question. Even a revolver like this, which from the factory came with a considerably better sight than the traditional ramp that you'll find on the 642 and 442. This is more challenging to shoot at distance. And the article that I'm writing for GAT, I actually did a heads up, a side-by-side. I shot this same pistol with just 38 defensive ammunition in it, and I ran it through the Hardwired Tactical Snubby Super Test, as well as Justin Dial's 5-yard roundup. Asterisk, kinda. So, to find out the details, you're gonna have to go over and read the article. I'm not gonna give you everything. But, the short version is this. I did find that in the use case of these small, little pocket-sized guns, where you can't readily upgrade the sights. If you have a good gunsmith, you can get improved sights on revolvers. There was one company who will occasionally open their books and mill these little 32s and 380s for proper sight dovetails, but that's still going to run you $150, and then you have your gun out of commission for that period of time. So, for circumstances like these, I can see a fairly compelling argument. And it was interesting seeing the difference in my performance with the iron sights on this pistol compared to the laser. At various different distances. Interestingly enough, I did still find it a bit challenging. The 10-yard string of the super test gave me a little bit of trouble with the laser. And it's for a couple of reasons. Number one, that was I shot irons first, laser second, so it was my second string of the day. But all in all, like, that was my first time really shooting any kind of handgun with a laser on it. So I was still very much getting familiarized with it up to that point. And just getting used to the wobble zone was similar to that wobble zone that you get introduced to when you switch from irons to a red dot. And then just, quite frankly, while I do have a decent, I think I've got a Wilson spring in here, my trigger control still needs some work. And so managing a double action trigger through that whole process was something that I struggled with a bit on the 10-yard string. But overall, just like when I switched from irons to a red dot, putting the laser on this made things a little bit easier. Now, I would be willing to venture that because I've spent the last several years shooting a red dot equipped pistol, I'm already, I guess, more primed to recognize what I need to see, in air quotes. And I have the discipline of not chasing the laser around the target. I can't say that's going to be the case for a completely novice shooter. However, if they know the limitations, they have the discipline to, undertake learning the system, I'm not going to rule it out. Now, again, if we're talking about somebody who's bought their first pistol and it's something that you can easily improve the sights on, that's going to be number one. And I'm going to go so far as to say that the amount of discipline and the amount of practice that it would take to properly master the presentation of a red dot pistol, so that way you're not hunting for it, is likely going to be in line with the amount of discipline and practice that it will take to not chase the red dot around the target like you're a cracked out cat. I don't know how to quantify those two things. Thankfully, Carl Wren was gracious enough. He actually ran a test with some students, and it was irons, laser, and red dot. Unsurprisingly, the newer shooters had a hell of a time finding the dot. They found the laser easier, and again, that's because unlike the pistol dot, the miniaturized red dot, this doesn't have as it's not as particular about proper presentation. You're able to steer this thing on target way more easily because it's quite literally projected downrange. So I don't want to go too in depth, but I want to start the conversation back up because, again, this is one of those things where it seems to have fallen out of favor. And there are folks from the kind of previous generation within the gun space who still have some of this knowledge and some of this expertise that, yeah, I don't think it's necessarily the optimal solution for somebody coming in. But there are definitely some use cases where it can improve the user experience. And so I would like to see them not necessarily make a resurgence in popularity, but not getting dismissed quite as rapidly as I have seen them and as I've been guilty of dismissing them in the past. They have, they have a place, and to steal a line from the Jerk, a special purpose. And, I think if you consider yourself a serious gun guy, and particularly if you fancy yourself an instructor on the general scale, specialization obviously is going to require a deeper dive in a narrower field. But if you're dealing with the general gun-owning public, we're going to get questions about these kind of things. And I think we would vastly be better served being able to comment on it intelligently instead of simply dismissing it as kind of a whimsical novelty of the past, because they still have their place. Do you have lasers on any of your guns? Have you had experience that drove you away from them? I want to hear about all that down in the comments. Other than that, hope everybody has a fantastic week. Stay dangerous and stay sharp.